Minutes gone when goalkeeper Rory Beggan scored from play. He made a really super run up the pitch and popped it over from 21 yards. And then within 2 minutes we saw Tyrone goalkeeper Niall Morgan reply with an equaliser. So very much the goalkeepers here that are putting on a show. And it is just now 9 points Tyrone, Monaghan 8 points. They just got a free there in the last minute from Darren McCurry.
Very good. Aisling O'Reilly at Healy Park, thanks for the time being. So Tyrone by 1 at Healy Park, 57 minutes on the clock in that game, and already we have 2 draws in Division 1. Draw between Kildare and Kerry, 13 points Kildare, 110 Kerry, and Mayo and Donegal drew as well, 11 points apiece. In Division 2 there was a win for Clare against Offaly, 113-7, and Galway beat Meath 114-6 points, and Roscommon had a very good win as well. They beat Cork 113-10 points. In Division 3, a good win for Laois away to Louth in the end, 3-9 Laois, 110 Louth. Westmeath 116, Wicklow 2-8. Westmeath had to come back from a deficit there to win that game. And in Division 4, Cavan 12 points to 8 winners against Leitrim. We had a draw between Waterford and Tipperary at Fraher Field, 10 points apiece, and it finished Wexford 10 points, Sligo 12 points at Wexford Park, so a win for Sligo away to Wexford. We are going to turn to the tennis because it has been an extraordinary weekend in Melbourne. Caitlin Thompson of Racket Magazine joins us on the line. Good evening. Hello.
Hi there. How's it going?
Very well. Rafa Nadal, 21 Grand Slam titles against Medvedev. I must admit, when I was getting up this morning and he was 2 sets to love down, I thought, okay, Rafa, these things happen. You're getting old, not to worry. And suddenly 5 sets and he's the champion.
Almost unbelievable to think not only him clawing his way back from a 2-set deficit against a extremely capable and compelling Daniil Medvedev, but also just 7 or 8 weeks ago, this guy was contemplating retirement. He had a lot of foot troubles. He had surgery last fall. So the idea of him competing, much less contending, much less winning his 21st Grand Slam seemed sort of off the table even just a few short weeks ago. So it's sort of staggering, the comeback in pretty much every sense of the word that needed to happen for him to lift the trophy today. And I'm really thrilled for him. I tried not to have a rooting interest because I like rooting for good tennis. That's not always what we got, but we certainly got a compelling match and could not be happier for one of the big 3, my current favorite certainly, in Rafa Nadal.
Yeah, and his left foot, so it seemed there was chronic pain there. He only played 1 tournament in the final 7 months of 2021.
Yeah, just a handful of matches. And I think for somebody like him, especially at the ripe age of 35, let's not forget that his physical style of tennis and being asked to compete in 5 sets over a fortnight is just physically unbelievably difficult. And I think the kind of points he constructs, and we can kind of get into the nitty gritty of tennis a little bit if you like, but he doesn't win a lot of free points on his serve. He obviously has huge weapons, but he's a grinder essentially. And to see him struggling in the first 2 sets, it looked like it was going to be sort of a cakewalk because Medvedev obviously is 10 years his junior and presumably a lot more fresh. That said, Nadal beat him physically. I mean, a lot of those points were really, really long. And to do that at the very end of what is a very long tournament in, probably certainly the tail end of a very long and obviously prosperous career is just, it's sort of unfathomable. Where at a certain point we kind of run out of words to talk about how big these achievements are. But I think for me, what was the biggest takeaway was just, it felt really good. It felt really good to watch him. It felt really good to see how much it meant to him. Because I think more than 2021, it meant his body was cooperating and he got to taste victory for only the 2nd time in Australia, which again is staggering to think about. All of the Grand Slams he's had, he only won 1 prior coming into this tournament at Melbourne. And this being his 2nd victory there, I think meant even maybe more than getting 21.
So what was his reaction when he won the winning point? Body language, emotion?
Certainly the grin on his face. We didn't kind of have the sinking to the knees Rafa that we've had in years past. There was, I think, being up 40-11 that last game and sort of having a clear separation finally in the 5th set. He was leading most of the set. So I think it was by no means a foregone conclusion. Rafa was up some breaks, but then lost a break back to give it 5-all. I think certainly relief, but also pure joy. I mean, we saw after the semifinal when he was able to win in what seems comparatively to be a sort of a tidy four-setter, he leaned over his racket bag and stuffed his head in between where the rackets are and just kind of wept to himself. If there's footage of him after the match going and essentially collapsing on the floor, it looked, to me at least, the trophy presentation, that he was maybe cramping. I think you really can't overestimate how physical a toll Rafa is willing to put his body through. So I think other than joy, elation, relief, I think just a complete physical, I don't know, physically maybe new territory even for him to sort of break through and hang in for that match was something sort of extraordinary to witness. And like I said, the tennis wasn't even the most compelling part. It was sort of sloppy. It was kind of messy. There were a lot of errors. It was actually very relatable in a way that made this one of my favorite Grand Slam finals of all time, because you could sort of see how the fatigue, the frequent drop shots, and the kind of mental fortitude was really more at play than watching people hit perfect shots, which is never as interesting to me as the sort of human drama.
So there must have been a turnaround at some point in this match, clearly. 6-2 the first set. The second set, hardly a whitewash. It went to a tie-break. And then Nadal rallied to win 3-4, 6-4, 6-4. What was the big difference for you between the first two sets and the subsequent three?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, if anything, I thought Nadal was going to sort of fade away. He should have won that second set. He was leading. He had some chances. He had, for him, what are sort of routine shots. And I think watching it, there was a lot of disbelief, like, oh man, well, that's about as good a fight as he can put up. This is going to be sort of a cakewalk now. Medvedev is so interesting, though, because I think he was a little bit more tired than he revealed, because he wasn't able to hang into some of those rallies into the third set. And I think at some point, Nadal just sort of, I don't know if I want to say decided or got opportune. His backhand certainly went from sort of being a neutral force to something a little bit more like the buzzsaw we're used to seeing at his highest gear. There were a little bit of sort of tactical changes, but more than anything else, I think Medvedev really gave him a lack of rhythm to work with, and maybe Rafa finally settled into it. Medvedev is such an amazing player to watch because he has essentially mastered the art of the knuckleball, right? Like, he's really good at no pace, no pattern, extreme pace, extreme pattern. His serve is obviously a giant weapon, but he's really able to disguise it well. And so he's sort of a master trickster in the best possible way. And I think for somebody like Rafa, who likes pattern, who likes routine, when we've seen Rafa get dismantled, it's either the off day when he's hit off the court, like by Wawrinka, he's lost in a war of attrition by somebody fitter than him, which is rare, but it's Novak. Or it's somebody who kind of gives him a lack of pace and pattern, or a variety of pace and pattern, which is somebody like Nick Kyrgios in the Acapulco final a couple of years ago, or today in the first two sets. So I think what's really interesting to me is there was as much of a fatigue match going on and sort of mental war of attrition. There was also some really zany, sloppy, exciting points that were, I think, kind of unlike what we're used to be seeing in a men's Grand Slam final. And for that reason, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And so I think that third set obviously was very pivotal in getting Rafa maybe some sense of control in the match when he had absolutely no reason to. I think after that second set, I would have bet almost no money that he was able to come back, not only because of the odds, but just he looked defeated after having opportunities. So it really was a very strange match in a lot of ways, and one that I was, given the time zone here in New York, sort of skeptical about waking up for, but I'm glad I caught the second set on in real time.
And Caitlin, you said Rafa did not win many easy points and doesn't tend to win many easy points. Is that something which has increased in tendency as he's got older, or has it always been thus?
I think it's always been the case. I mean, certainly he's. I think a lot of credit this morning has been given to Carlos Moya, his coach. After being essentially raised and trained by Uncle Tony, who's now, interestingly, with Felix Auger-Aliassime to good effect. Felix came within a couple of points of beating Daniil Medvedev. He had a match point, certainly. I think Carlos Moya has made slight adjustments to Rafa's game. He's given him a little bit bigger of a serve. It's still not much to speak of. I think the ace that he hit, the second to last point, out wide, was the first ace he'd hit all match. Rafa's never been a giant server. And I think he's gotten him to stand certainly up in the court, which is crucial in hard courts. But it's. I just want to sort of contextualize this a little bit because it was something that I remember thinking about Andy Murray, which is, when you are so good and you're beating 99.9% of the field, how does it feel mentally to change your game really to only be relevant in 1 or 2 matches per year because you know that you're already at a level that can routinely beat pretty much everybody else? Like what specifically, and what sort of headspace do you have to be in to say, okay, my game is already working and already really functional almost every single time I walk out on the court, with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 times a year when I play one of these other big 3. And what does that take to do? And I think Carlos Moya has, in Rafa's game in the last certainly couple of years, despite him losing Roland Garros last year, which was seen by many people as sort of, a shock upset when he lost to Djokovic in the semis, I believe it was. And, really today and this 2 weeks match, we've seen him a little bit more aggressive and standing a little bit closer in. So the backhand and the serve, I have to say, are a little bit better. But more than anything else, I think it's just sort of stubbornness. I mean, that's really what defines Rafa. He won't fade away. He won't stop fighting. He plays the first point of the first match in a tournament the very same as he plays the last point in the last match of a tournament. And almost nobody else does that, even though they're the other greatest champions the game has ever seen. It's just sort of, it's kind of unfathomable. And I think, if you want to go back to today's match, like one of the things that certainly made that evident is 2 sets down. He competed every single point like it was the last one of his life. And I think, he's got 21 Grand Slam trophies now to show for it.
So for Medvedev, this may be very unfair, right? But for, I think, the casual fan, this will just rubber stamp the sense that this next batch behind the big 3 or the big 4 are just no good. And here he was, 2 sets to love up, a chance to win second Grand Slam in a row, a chance to really begin to try and put his throat on the aging superstars, and he bottled it. And eventually he's going to win a few more because of age, but really this is just an embarrassing defeat for a 25-year-old against a 35-year-old with a 2-love in sets head start here. That's the really unfair characterization, but I guarantee you that's what a lot of tennis fans or even casual fans are thinking. Like, what do this next generation want?
Yeah. I think you could probably have said the same thing after Tsitsipas lost the French Open to Novak after leading for 2 sets. I mean, I think part of it is, the game style that 5-set tennis affords them. I think it favors it widens the inequality in tennis in the sense that, the ones who are able to travel on private jets, the ones who are able to have an entire team around them, the ones who are able to get, sort of physical and treatments that are maybe in a gray zone of ethics, based on a lot of pretty widely reported coaches and trainers on tour. That edge starts to disappear if you play over 3 sets. 3 sets really favors a more aggressive style. It favors the upstart. It favors boldness. And, I think for me, one of the reasons that the big 3 have been so dominant is because you have 3 people who are particularly well suited to long matches. I mean, Federer certainly less than the other 2. But I find it a less typically exciting style of tennis because it really does, sort of heavily favor the favorite. And I also think, Medvedev in this particular case, he's spoken about after the match, how the crowd affected him. Now he's also kind of a troll. So he seems to like the sort of back and forth he has with the crowd. That said, today's crowd was cheering against him between serves. They were so overwhelmingly rooting for Rafa. And I guess part of it is because Rafa is sort of a favorite. He's familiar. There's a lot of casual fans who tend to tune in at the very end of a tournament. And I also think, watching somebody try to make history, we can look back to Novak Djokovic going for 21 slams last summer in New York City and finding himself for a very rare period of time on the sort of rooting interest favorite of the crowd. But I do think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Medvedev was overwhelmingly disliked in this final. I encourage anybody, especially the casual tennis fan, if you want to become more than casually acquainted with tennis, and you're welcome to come, hang out in our Discord, get on Twitter, start watching more than just the Grand Slams. But also it's considered wildly poor behavior to applaud mistakes, instead cheering tennis. And one of the things that I like so much about the game of tennis is that if you were to watch today as neutral as I did and be truly happy with whatever outcome, it sort of frees you up to root for great tennis and good points. And I think what a lot of the crowd noise I heard today even compared to yesterday in the women's Grand Slam final, where an Australian woman, a home favorite, won a Grand Slam trophy in Australia for the first time in decades. The crowd was relentlessly pro Nadal more than they were relentlessly pro Ash Barty. And I think that really says a lot about, the sort of, I think, casual fan that kind of could use a refresher in how to watch tennis, which is cheer for the good tennis. So I don't think that was not a factor today. And I'd like to see, the fans who are just coming into the sport, whether that's because they find some of these storylines compelling, or maybe they're going to watch that and, Drive to Survive-esque documentary series that's currently being filmed and come in via, a new pathway like Netflix created for F1. And when they get here, I hope that they'll find that there are many, many, many people to root for. And at the end of the day, what we get to watch is great tennis. So always applaud the good shots, and don't really root against anybody, I think, is sort of how I'd say it, because I think that was a factor today for sure. Okay,
interesting. So in the short term, Rafa Nadal moves to 21, Djokovic stays on 20, and they go to France. Well, I say they go to France. I don't know if Djokovic goes to France, so we use that word advisedly. It's amazing how the last 3 weeks have turned everything upside down.
Completely right. There's a lot of sort of speculation, at least in my Discord channel and my private chats, that if Novak was not motivated enough to get a shot, and I don't know what further could motivate him, because it looks like he's going to be facing stronger and stronger restrictions the more he tries to travel around. Being able to go to Roland Garros and stop what is probably now looking a little bit more like an inevitability of Rafa being able to get 22 in France. I truly don't think Rafa Nadal cares about the Grand Slam count. I don't. But I definitely think Novak Djokovic does. And if there's anything that's going to motivate him to get the jab that everybody else who's a responsible adult across the world has done, maybe it's this. So your move, Rafa. I mean, your move, Novak. Let's see how much these Grand Slam titles mean to you.
Yeah, I think most people at this stage are very familiar with the fact that Ash Barty won Grand Slam number 3, and more importantly, from an Australian point of view, bridged the 44 years. So a home winner, and the scenes you might expect. She beat Danielle Collins in straight sets. Is she approaching a dominant category in the women's game? Because the general sense over the last couple of years at Grand Slam level certainly is it's incredibly open.
Yeah, I think it's always a little bit more exciting on the women's side, just because Grand Slam tennis is only contended in 3, and as such you get a little bit less of a predictable narrative. And I also think Ash Barty has had really good peak moments. She certainly had one in this tournament where she looked a level above pretty much everyone else. And Danielle Collins is a berserker, ambitious, amazing sort of chaos agent on the tour. So if you haven't watched her before, make sure you watch some of the highlights, and her celebrations are really not to be missed. And good for her for reaching her first Grand Slam final. Hopefully it won't be her last. That said, Ash Barty was really a cut above everybody, even when she was losing that second set. Down a couple breaks. It's just her composure and her skills and her tool set, her plan A, plan B, and even plan C are just so much better than most other women on the tour at the moment. That said, Aryna Sabalenka has given her fits on the tour when they're both playing very well. That's a really even matchup. I would have loved to see Naomi play better and frankly prepare better for this tournament, because I think she too can reach that level. And I think Garbiñe Muguruza had a really bad tournament, but had a great end of the year. Ash Barty barely contended for the year-end finals. So I think for me, there's obviously a bit of separation. I think for a sort of casual watcher, what's so amazing about what Ash Barty did yesterday is she won a Grand Slam on 3 surfaces. That is, to me, more important than Grand Slam count. And it's more important than running up the score at a favorite tournament. It's really amazing to do it on grass. It's really amazing to do it on clay, and it's really amazing to do it on hard. And it's most amazing to be able to do it all on all 3 surfaces. And now, obviously, she's only missing the U.S. Open from her trophy case. So I think, yes, it's exciting, and she really does have the all-around game, given the fact that she can win on all these surfaces. That makes her a year-long threat, instead of somebody who just kind of peaks or goes after or lines up well with one particular, continent or surface or sort of temperature. But I do think there are a number of people on the tour who can give her a really good run for her money. And I think, I would hate to, as the Big 3 era, even as it is still alive today, kind of is obviously waning, for us to have a sort of predictable champion on the women's side. That's what makes women's tennis so amazing, that there's always such a sort of variety of dominance, even during Serena's most dominant years, because she didn't play all the time or because she tended to favor certain tournaments over others. There was always a sense that it was a little bit up for grabs. And I love that very much about the women's game. It's hard to imagine Ash Barty becomes like the dominant force like Steffi Graf was for so many years, or like any one of these big threes has each sort of taken their turns being. That said, I'm really thrilled for her, because I think it's an incredible accomplishment, and winning at home is something that, is just really, really, really special for anybody to be able to manage those emotions and actually do. And you saw how much it meant to her. She's usually pretty stoic, but in winning the match yesterday, she was obviously very, very emotional, and getting to celebrate it with, some fellow Aboriginal legends such as Yvonne Goolagong it's a really cool thing for tennis, and it's a really cool thing for her, obviously.
Very good. Caitlin Thompson from Racket Magazine. Thanks so much, Caitlin. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. The latest from Healy Park is that it looks to have finished in a draw, which is extraordinary given that the other two Division 1 matches today were draws. I don't know what the odds at the start of the day of that were, but it seems like we've had 3 matches, 3 draws in Division 1. 9